thought we could just start with the Texas redistricting fight. For anyone watching who doesn't know, dozens of Democrats have fled the state of Texas because their legislature is trying to redraw the map in a way that would effectively give Republicans 5 more seats in the House. You have said this is an effort to rig the midterms. Kathy Hochul has said it's war. I'm curious, history has shown us that when these legislatures leave and come back, ultimately, the state does what it planned to do anyway. So do you think in this case, these Democrats should stay out of the state indefinitely, even through next year's midterms?
Well, that's a decision that, of course, will be made by the House Democrats in Texas who've courageously made the decision not to vote on a set of gerrymandered congressional districts that are designed to undermine the ability of the people of Texas to have a free and fair election. Donald Trump ordered Texas Republicans to change these maps in the middle of the decade in order to try to rig the midterm elections because he's afraid that they're going to be wiped out. Now, it is important to note that this is a special session that, by law, pursuant to the Texas Constitution, has about 2.5 or so weeks left. And the Texas Democrats in the legislature will make a decision as to what's appropriate, given what's taking place in Texas right now, but we stand squarely behind them.
If you believe this is an effort to rig the elections, and we're seeing it in Texas, we don't know where we might see it next. What concrete playbook are you putting forward to stop sort of political theft, if that's what you see it as?
Well, in addition to standing behind the Texas Democrats, and we're so appreciative of their courage, their character, and the conviction, of course, that they're showing. I spent time with them in Austin last Wednesday,
Right.
which was the date that the maps first came out, as well as on Thursday, where we spoke to the people of Texas about why this was so problematic for them, and why these gerrymandered maps would result in undermining their quality of life. Because this is not just political gamesmanship. This is about whether you're going to have members of Congress or potentially Democrats in the majority who actually are going to fix our broken healthcare system as opposed to ripping healthcare away from the American people. Whether you're going to have a Democratic majority in the House that is trying to lower the high cost of living as opposed to raising costs on everyday Americans, which Donald Trump and Republicans are doing, particularly as it relates to the Trump tariffs, and whether you're going to actually have a Congress led by Democrats in the House who are going to clean up corruption and try to deliver a government that actually works for the American people, or this corrupt situation that we see going on right now, which is a government of the billionaires, by the billionaires, and for the billionaires. And that is what the one big ugly bill was all about: hurt everyday Americans to reward their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks. So I want to make sure that everyone understands the stakes that are involved with what Republicans are trying to do. Democrats are only 3 seats short of taking back the House next November. That's the narrowest majority that any party has had since the Great Depression. And that is one of the reasons why Donald Trump and Republicans are running scared, because they haven't produced anything for the American people to make their life better. In fact, they're actively making life worse. So it's all hands on deck in terms of making sure that the national congressional map is fair, which is why you're seeing other states led by Governor Newsom in California, as well as, of course, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois and Governor Kathy Hochul in New York, making it very clear that there will be a Democratic response.
So let me ask you, there's 2 ways Democrats can respond. One is to try to redraw the districts in blue states as well to meet that challenge. And you've just mentioned Kathy Hochul, who I spoke with last week. She plans to take that action if she can, given their constitution at some point. Here in California, where I am, Governor Newsom wants a special election to allow California to redraw its maps to counter Texas. Just on that point, do you support that effort?
I support the effort led by Governor Newsom, as well as the members of the California congressional delegation, led by Zoe Lofgren, Nadine, and Pete Aguilar, the chair of the House Democratic Caucus. Of course, in partnership with Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. It's a powerhouse delegation in California, along with the legislative members of the California Assembly and State Senate, all of whom are in session right now and are discussing the appropriate way to respond. Now, as I understand it, and this is important, that Governor Newsom is contemplating going to the voters to indicate that under these circumstances, where you have extreme MAGA Republicans in the House, as well as, of course, in the Senate, led by Donald Trump, actively trying to hurt California and then trying to make things worse by rigging the election and imposing a gerrymandered congressional map on the country through Texas, potentially stealing 5 seats, the voters of California will have an ability to resolve that issue as to whether there should be a response from the great state of California. That's an appropriate way to proceed and a model for what can be done potentially in other states.
So it sounds like it's a arms race in a sense. If the red states are doing it, the blue states are doing it. I want to give you a counter example. Another elected official from California, Republican Representative Kevin Kiley, who serves in the House, is pushing federal legislation to ban all of this. He wants to stop all the redistricting. It doesn't take a terribly hard leap of logic to understand that's because he would probably lose his seat here in California if it redistricted. Is there a version of events, though, where you see a Republican breaking with Trump on this? And would you push Democrats to get behind his effort and make it a bipartisan plan to block all redistricting?
Well, here's the thing about Kevin Kiley. We haven't heard a peep from him about what is taking place in Texas. Not a word. And in fact, this guy introduces a bill, which of course is triggered by Trump's malignant actions in Texas, which Texas Republicans support. They all fall in line like they always do, and doesn't even mention what's happening in Texas, which tells you that this is a phony effort and it's all about self preservation. If these Republicans were actually interested in taking a good government approach, they would support what House Democrats have consistently introduced, which is nationwide redistricting standards that would prohibit states like Texas from engaging in extreme partisan gerrymandering in the absence of voter approval. But Kevin Kiley has never expressed support for that legislation that is part of our, for the people democracy reform legislation, which, by the way, Jessica, as you know, the House has passed not once, but twice. Not a single Republican has ever supported this efforts. So we're happy to have that conversation at the appropriate time in terms of a good government approach nationally. But the notion that Democrats are going to unilaterally disarm in the face of this extremism that has been unleashed on the American people, this assault on the economy, assault on healthcare, assault on children, assault on veterans, assault on hardworking American taxpayers, assault on the rule of law, on law abiding immigrant communities, and democracy itself. And we're supposed to unilaterally disarm. It's not going to happen.
Is that what he's asking for, or is he just asking for a ban on all redistricting nationally? And could Democrats just call his bluff and say, sure, we're in on that too, and bar Texas, and then it takes this arms race, it disarms the arms race?
Yeah,
Yep.
given the fact that he didn't even bother to mention Texas when he introduced the bill, it's not even clear to us without taking a look at the bill whether it
What's
would
in it?
apply to
That's
Texas.
fair. Right. Okay. Let me ask you this. Democrats control 18 state legislatures. I think my math is correct. GOP 28. I was covering national politics in Washington, D.C. back in the year 2010 when Republicans publicly told all of us, all the political reporters, we are going to make an effort to win as many state legislatures as we can and try to redraw the maps. They were not secret about it. It was public. They have had 3 cycles of doing this. So my question is this an arms race Democrats can actually win? And starting with President Obama, who knew this was happening in 2018, why did Democrats let this go unchallenged for so long?
Well, that's a very good question. And here's the thing. The good news is Democrats actually did respond in the aftermath of the 2010 redistricting that took place in advance of the 2020 redistricting by forming, led by President Obama, Speaker Emerita Pelosi, then Leader Pelosi at the time, and former Attorney General Eric Holder, in forming the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, which has litigated case after case after case and been on the front lines, which has resulted in the current congressional map being the fairest in decades. But that is why Republicans are now trying to change the dynamics by going back into Texas to do mid-decade redistricting after they went back into North Carolina last cycle and redrew the North Carolina congressional map, which is an important point here because, we're 3 seats short, as I mentioned. Now, North Carolina is a 50-50 state, swing state. Donald Trump narrowly won in November of last year in North Carolina, but the governor is a Democrat, the lieutenant governor is a Democrat, the attorney general is a Democrat, other statewide offices held by Democrats. Democrats won a close election for the North Carolina Supreme Court seat that was also on the ballot in November of 2024. Democrats won across the state of North Carolina in November of 2024 while losing at the top of the ticket. So North Carolina is a 50-50 state. It had fair maps that were drawn at the beginning of this decade. And as a result, the delegation in North Carolina, which is 14 members, had 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans. Until last year, Republicans, because they gained control of the state Supreme Court, went back to court, and some right-wing judges on the North Carolina Supreme Court reauthorized mid-decade redistricting in North Carolina, and they changed the composition of the North Carolina congressional delegation from 7-7, which is what it was as recently as January 2nd of this year, the day before the new Congress was sworn in, stole 3 seats from the people of North Carolina that were held by Democrats, made them deeply Republican seats, and now the North Carolina delegation went from 7-7 on January 2nd to 10-4 on January 3rd, the date the new Congress was sworn in. In other words, Republicans wouldn't even be in the majority right now, absent stealing 3 seats from the people of North Carolina in mid-decade redistricting. And so we have fair maps, but wherever they exist, Republicans are now trying to change them. That's what's happening in Texas. That's why we're going to have to respond in the middle of the decade, just like they are trying to launch this assault in the middle
So
of the decade.
let me ask you. So I heard you say California, New York, Illinois are among the states that Democrats could try to redraw maps. Colorado, New Jersey, are they possibilities too?
Yeah, Colorado, New Jersey, potentially Oregon, Washington. Now, the issue that exists in pretty much every single one of these states, with the exception of Illinois, is that Democrats have, at different points in time, put into place independent redistricting commissions that have drawn these maps as part of an effort to make sure that the people, understandably, would have the ability to choose their representatives as opposed to politicians choosing the voters they want to represent. Because we are a party that is anti-gerrymandering. And so you've got commissions now in all of these different states. So every state is unique in terms of having to go back to the people of that state and through a referendum, a constitutional amendment, a ballot question, every state is unique, perhaps through the state legislature, if that is the process, to, have that discussion with the American people in these states about what is the appropriate way to respond to this aggressive mid-decade
That's
action
what
being taken.
And that's what we're going to see happen in a lot of these states in the next few months. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about some of the other major things you referenced. Um, Just this past week, looking more broadly at what's going on with Trump, Attorney General Pam Bondi ordered prosecutors to start a grand jury probe of Obama officials over the Russia investigation. The Trump administration is trying to investigate former Trump special counsel Jack Smith. Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's very clear that they are not following the rules. Given that, should Democrats start breaking some rules too? I mean, I can think of leaking documents, doing sit-ins. Are you open to unconventional tactics at this point as well?
Well, I've said that we're in a more is more environment, and we're going to have to continue to push back aggressively in the Congress, in the states, in the courts, in communities across the country to win over the hearts and minds of the American people. We are in a more is more environment. You know, Cory Booker and I in late April sat on the Capitol steps for about 12 and a half hours, conducted a sit in that eventually resulted in hundreds of people throughout the day showing up. This was in advance of our effort to push back against the one big ugly bill because we knew they were trying to rip away healthcare from the American people. That's just part of what we have to continue to do. More town hall meetings, more protests, more marches, more demonstrations, more speeches, more sit-ins, speeches on the House floor, speeches on the Senate floor, hearings that we've been holding as Democrats on Capitol Hill. We're taking hearings across the country in different states. We're going to have to continue to do more to meet and match and exceed the diabolical intensity that's coming from the other side of the aisle with righteous intensity in defense of the American people.
So last night, Rachel Maddow, and she is not the official spokesperson for anything, but she does have a lot of fans who have been talking about what she said last night. And she said this: "We have a consolidating dictatorship in our country, and right now is the point at which Americans have the most tools for democratic resistance." Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree with her from the standpoint of what John Lewis would often instruct us to do, which is that when you see something wrong, when you see injustice in society, you've got to show up and stand up and speak up for what you know is right, and go out there and get into good trouble, necessary trouble, as what that's what the civil rights leaders, that's what John Lewis, that's what the foot soldiers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma did. There is a blueprint for the American people rising up and expressing their strong opposition to the things that are taking place in a society that are wrong. And that's a blueprint that was used by our civil rights heroes to get America from where it was in the Jim Crow era to a better place. And certainly we now find ourselves in a situation where, Donald Trump and these extreme MAGA Republicans, they don't want to move the country forward. They're trying to turn back the clock, like in real time, erase our history. They're not trying to bring anybody together. They actually are consistently tearing the country apart. And as you indicated, using the criminal justice system, weaponizing the Department of Justice to go after people who are standing up in principled opposition to them. That is what authoritarians do. But we're not going to be cowed by it. We're not going to be intimidated. We're going to continue to stand up and speak up and show up in the great spirit of John Lewis and Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer and Dr. King and our heroes who, at another critical juncture in American history, summoned the courage and the conviction and the character to push back.
So I hear what you're saying, and that many members of Congress really want to see mass movements in the streets, the people rising up to increase the pressure. There's also some frustration among the people with the party. Let's talk about the Democratic Party. Latest polling, 33% favorable view, congressional Democrats at 19%. You know all these things. What I hear from my audience when I ask, I'm talking to Leader Jeffries, what would you like me to ask? I hear that centrists often feel ignored, progressives feel sidelined. I know it cannot be easy to do your job, but I'm curious, inside your caucus, which faction is really driving things? Is it the progressives? Is it centrists? Is it someone else?
Well, within the caucus, we are a family, and that's progressives, and that's New Dems, and that's Blue Dogs. Of course, people on the left, people who are left of center, people who are in the center. The caucus has been completely and entirely unified throughout the first 6.5, 7 months of this presidency, this congressional session, right? We've pushed back aggressively against their efforts to jam a partisan spending bill down the throats of the American people, unified. We've pushed back at every step of the way as it relates to this one big ugly bill. We voted on it 3 different times, and every single House Democrat strongly opposed the bill. We forcefully debated it before the Rules Committee on the floor of the House of Representatives over and over and over again. Members were leaving their hospital beds or fresh off of surgery to actually fly halfway across the country in the form of Joyce Beatty or Brittany Pedersen, who's taking her newborn son across the country in late February, literally weeks after he had been born, so she could make sure she was on the House floor. And of course, Kevin Mullen, who flew across the country in late February to be there to push back against the one big ugly bill the first time it was brought to the floor, notwithstanding the fact that he had just had multiple surgeries, he had to fly across the country with his wife so she could change his IV on the plane. He flew from Northern California to Washington, D.C. to make it. That's the resolve that House Democrats have shown, every single one of them. So whether it's Representative Ocasio-Cortez, to Representative Jared Golden, and all points in between, House Democrats will remain unified as we push back against the American people, on behalf of the American people, against the extremism that has been unleashed on the American people by Donald Trump and House Republicans. The Democratic Party standing, of course, there is going to be real disappointment with the fact that the Democratic Party lost the election in November of 2024. And now we have to deal with this guy and the malignant clown show that has been unleashed on the American people since January 20th. But I think we are going to continue to forcefully respond. We've been winning special election after special election after special election throughout the country, including, of course, the most important special election that took place in Wisconsin, where we defeated Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and a right wing judicial candidate by 11 points in the swing state of Wisconsin. So the pushback is happening, it's tangible, and there are real signs of movement in the right direction, but we have to continue to do more.
Let me ask you about one of the recent elections where we saw a lot of energy, which was in New York State with Zohran Mamdani. He represents a young, diverse, unapologetically progressive wing of the party, and its influence is growing. What do you need to do? What's your process for deciding whether or not you will endorse him?
Well, we had a very good conversation uh, about a day or so before he spent some time with the family in Uganda, and we agreed to get back together upon his return. So that's in motion. He's meeting with other members of the congressional delegation, as we speak, and I look forward to connecting with him. He asked me to put together a meeting with some of the leaders within the African American community, African American clergy, civic leaders, civil rights leaders in the neighborhoods that I represent. And I told them that I would put that together for him. We'll do it at some point over the next few weeks, and then we'll take it from there.
Do you support plans for free buses, free childcare, $30 minimum wage across the country? Is this something you want to see cities do?
Well, what we said from the very beginning of this Congress on January 3rd, in my first remarks to the newly elected House of Representatives, that we are ready to deal with the cost of living crisis that exists in the United States of America. Costs are too high. The country is too expensive. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. Childcare costs are too high. Insurance is too high. America is too expensive. Republicans promised to lower the high cost of living. In fact, on day one, costs aren't going down. However, they're going up. The Trump tariffs are going to increase costs on everyday Americans, the average American family, by thousands of dollars a year.
In fact,
And
we
so,
saw a town hall, like
Yes.
we saw a town hall last night with Representative Floyd in Nebraska, where he was in his red district speaking about what his plans are, and he got shouted down by the audience, outraged that said, tax the rich, we're outraged about Medicaid changes, all of this. My question is, what can you do to ensure that rage translates into success for Democrats and not maybe even a third party?
Well, what we are seeing across the country, and as I mentioned, in fact, Nebraska was part of this. Democrats won a special election in Iowa for the Iowa State Senate at the end of January in a seat that had just been won by Donald Trump by 21 points. We had a 25-point overperformance. That was in Iowa in January. In February, we won a special election for the Westchester County Executive seat. It was a seat that had been previously held by both Democrats and Republicans. Donald Trump endorsed the Republican in that race in February. The Democratic candidate won by 30 points. Then in March, of course, we won a special election in Pennsylvania for a state Senate seat in Lancaster County. It was a seat that Donald Trump had just won by 15 points. The Democrat won that race. I mentioned earlier, we won the race in Wisconsin, the state Supreme Court race. Elon Musk poured about $25 million into the race. The people of Wisconsin rejected that extremism, supported our candidate, who will be an enlightened member of the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. Then in Nebraska, in May, of course, we flipped a seat that had been held by Republicans in terms of the mayor of Omaha, Nebraska. It had been held by Republicans for the previous 12 years. A Democrat won. It's the first time that an African American will now be the mayor of the great city of Omaha. So what we're seeing in all of these special elections, and those are just some of the highlights, that the Democratic base is turning out uh, and overperforming in high numbers. Independents and swing voters are moving in our direction, and Republican voters are showing a lack of enthusiasm because they've been betrayed. They've been
I,
disappointed. Their health
I
care is being taken away.
I hear everything you're saying, and you have so many numbers and you have so many successes to point to. And yet so many Democrats feel this deep frustration and this sense that there's not enough fight in Washington. There's not enough resistance. A, do you hear that? And B, what can you do about it?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm open to any suggestions that anyone may have,
Okay.
right? But
People
what I
write
can
him.
say, right? I think Corey's shown fight. I think Senator Padilla has shown fight. Chris Van Hollen leaving the country, has shown fight. The progressives, are showing fight over and over again. We've seen New Dems and Blue Dogs stand up consistently. We've seen records broken on the House floor. We've seen records broken on the Senate floor. We've seen sit-ins. We've seen members get arrested over and over and over again, showing up at ICE detention centers, making sure that that we're pushing back against the extremism that has been unleashed by these mass ICE agents. But we're in a more is more environment. So we just have to continue to do more until we can end the national nightmare that has been imposed on the American people. What I will say to folks, and as I travel the country, I say, look, Donald Trump was more popular than he had ever been on January 20th. And of course, had the algorithms in many instances working in his favor, has the right wing disinformation machine working in his favor, has conservative news working in his favor, more popular than he had ever been. 6 months later, he is the most unpopular president at the 6 month mark in modern American history. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a result of everybody who is outraged by what is happening, showing up and standing up and speaking up, particularly because he had every possible advantage on January 20th, the most unpopular president in modern American history at the 6 month mark. The one big ugly bill, as you know, is consistently unpopular. 18 points, 19 points, 20 points, 21 points underwater. It was unpopular when it was being debated on the House floor, on the Senate floor, when it passed, in the weeks subsequent to it being passed. These are measures of Democrats, but more importantly, the American people rejecting what they are trying to do as it relates to jamming things down the throats of the American people.
They're just
Republicans
trust.
can't even have town hall meetings right now
That is true.
because the level of concern and outrage is so significant. Does that happen on its own, or does it result from actually some measure of an effective pushback that has to be sustained and intensified? That's not a question that I'm prepared to answer, but that is a question that everyone should be asking themselves and can come to their own conclusions.
Okay, I promised your team you've given me a ton of your time. I have one more question. I want to say one thing, which is I'm not going to ask you about this, but everybody wants to know how these ICE agents are being recruited, who they are, where they're coming from. Do you guys have any power to try to make that transparent? That would be wonderful because I know a lot of journalists want to know and people. Um, Secondly, I like to end with a more human question, if we could, because you're a human being doing this work, and it's hard for all of us to live in this moment. I call my brand News Not Noise because we all need a break from the noise. And I ask people who are in the pressure cooker like you, what do you do to unplug? What is your go to strategy to find your balance and feel human again?
Well, my go to strategy, whenever possible, one is to take walks early in the morning. I'm a particular fan of the Shirley Chisholm State Park that I was honored to help create in the East New York section of Brooklyn. It's a wonderful place to visit for anyone who ever finds themselves in that part of the district, thinking about how to proceed, what's going on, how to move forward, addressing all of the challenges, of course, that we face, but doing it in the peace and tranquility of nature. I try to do that as often as I can. Not as often as I would like, but as often as I can. And I certainly, look forward to continuing to follow the New York Knicks when the season resumes in October, St. John's basketball when the season resumes in November. And both St. John's and the Knicks had great seasons most recently and brought a lot of joy to my life, though, of course, the ending in both instances was disappointing.
There's so much in life we cannot control, but it is wonderful to have those escapes. Um, Leader Jeffries, thank you so much for your time today. And I would love to stay in touch with you as this midterm drama evolves. Thank you.
Look forward to it. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you. Have a good one.